flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Staff, please take attendance.
President English,
Present.
Director Ahern,
Present.
Director Hardy,
Present.
Director Johnson,
Present.
Director Williams.
Present.
Director Mechanic and Director Vieira indicated that they will not be attending this meeting today. President English, you have a quorum.
David Smoker is calling me. I'm not sure why. Yes, David?
Hey, Mr. English, you can't get in. That's supposed to unlock the door.
We'll take care of it. Would someone please lock the door downstairs so that Mr. Smolker can come in?
Can't.
I'm wondering.
Well, welcome to all the board members who are physically present and those who are present electronically. The rules for a hybrid meeting participation are provided in our packet. The next item agenda is approval of the minutes from September 15th, 2021, regular Board of Directors.
Motion to
hybrid meetings.
approve.
We have
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Johnson for approval, a second by Ms. Ahern. Staff will take the vote by name and announce the result.
President English,
Present.
yay. Director Ahern,
Yay.
Director Hardy,
Yay.
Director Johnson,
Yes.
Director Williams.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the Streetcar System Performance Report for the months October and November 2021. Mr. Allen?
Good afternoon, President English, members of the board, Ms. LeGrand. For the month of October, our ridership was 77,481. Of those, 125 were ADA boardings. Our on-time performance was 99.71, with 12 reported late departures. And we had 17 reported missed trips, all of which were linked to mechanical issues. We had no accidents in the month of October. We did have 2 incidents, which both were vehicles being stuck on the track, one at Channelside Drive in Whiting and the other one at Franklin Street and Channelside. For November, ridership was 79,971. That compares to 85,663, which was our pre-pandemic number. So we're getting very, very close to getting back to the pre-pandemic levels. Of that number, 115 are ADA boardings. We had, our OTP was 99.36% with 26 reported late departures. This was caused primarily because CSX was doing work on their rail line for 2 days, and it caused a 2-minute delay for each one of our cars, and that stacked up to add to that high number of late departures for us. We had 29 reported missed trips in November. These were caused by mechanical issues and a shortage in operators, once again. And we had 3 incidents this month with no accidents. All 3 of those were also vehicles getting stuck on the track. Once again, Channelside Drive at Whiting, 6th Avenue here in the ballasted track section, and between stations 6 and 7. For infrastructure, we have some new crosswalks in place. There's new crosswalks across Channelside Drive at Beneficial and Whiting, or at Water Street, and a new crosswalk at Whiting. And there's a brand new crosswalk at Whiting Street and Channelside Drive as part of the new Channelside work.
Excellent.
And we had 3 student motormen start on October 25th. They moved on the job training on November 23rd after completing their classroom part of the training.
Excellent.
So does anybody have any questions for me?
Yes,
President English, ma'am. I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to share because it wasn't brought up on the screen when Mr. Allen was doing his report. But the information that Mr. Allen shared is in the report section on the agenda. So if you do click on the link, You'll see it segregated by October as well as November, so both of those reports will give you the details that Mr. Allen shared.
Thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Allen?
I have one comment.
Mhm.
This is kind of relating to the safety, but our red paint also started to go in, is about to start to go in with our Channel Side
Can you
Drive.
speak clearly into the microphone,
Sure.
please?
With our Channel Side Drive project, so you'll start seeing the red transit paint in the tracks as well.
Looking very forward to it.
Thank you, Mr. Allen, for your report. Let it be noted that Mr. Smoker has arrived. They finally let you in the building?
They did.
That's good.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
I'm gonna have to use my cell phone, so I am perfect.
Yes, you did. The next item on our agenda is the presentation of the Envision Tampa Streetcar Extension and Modernization Project. Mr. Steve Shoecraft from HDR is here this afternoon to do that presentation for us. Mr. Shoecraft?
Good afternoon. I wanted to introduce myself. I'm the incoming.
Speak in the microphone, please.
Sure. Good afternoon. I wanted to introduce myself. I'm the incoming project manager from the city of Tampa. I work with Mr. Hardy. Milton Martinez, as some of you may know, is retiring, unfortunately, and so I'm the incoming transportation manager. And so I work with Steve, and I'll be seeing all of you much more.
Well,
So
we're
thank
very
you. Nice
happy to
meet
have you, Danny.
Yeah, thank you.
Make sure. Send. Good afternoon, I'm Steve Shoecraft with HDR. I'm the project manager with the consultant team for the streetcar project for this phase of it, which is the project, initially feasibility assessment and then project development process.
Steve, try and speak directly in the microphone.
Sorry. Let me lean down a little bit. Is that picking up?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Much of this presentation you've seen previously, so I'll go through these preliminary slides relatively quickly, but I'll give you a sense of the background of the project and how we ended up where we are. And then we'll focus on kind of the current state of the project, some of the challenges that we face as we think about how to address the lack of the local funding share of the project and the things that we're working on next. So the streetcar project has been defined initially. The purpose and need for the project has been defined as a method to connect the core activity centers and destinations across the broad footprint of downtown. And when we talk about downtown, we usually mean the greater downtown, which would include Ybor City, Channel District, now Water Street, which was kind of a vision when we first started this project 5 years ago, and it's a third of the way through its development cycle. Convention Center, the core of downtown, North Downtown up to Tampa Heights. Within that loop that exists now on the existing system and then the extension, we connect all of the major employment, cultural, education, entertainment destinations across downtown. So this would provide for a single option to make that trip from Ybor City to downtown to the north end of downtown. One of the key elements to the project is we've talked about it in the purpose and need statement, which is an important description of what this is intended to do for Federal Transit Administration as they review projects, is about first mile and last mile connectivity. What streetcar has the potential to do is stitch together regional transit at Marion Transit Center, waterborne transit at the Convention Center, the potential for Brightline terminus, if that lands somewhere in the vicinity of Union Station, to the rest of downtown. So this can be that single way to distribute those long-haul regional trips across downtown without requiring some form of a single occupancy vehicle trip. And then the third thing, we've identified this as a project that would be the beginning of a larger system. So we're thinking about the possibility of this being a starter or an extension of the existing system with the possibility of further extensions to the west or to the north. So the city of Tampa has been the study leader, partnering with HART as the potentially the FTA grant recipient and the contract operator for the system, and DOT as a sponsor both for the study itself. They kicked in some of the initial dollars to get us started, but also for the system with the grant that's allowed for the increased level of service and for the free fares over the last several years. So you all know this story better than anyone. We're not just seeing a lot of development. There's a lot of additional development in the pipeline for downtown, from Ybor City, the build-out of Channel District, Water Street, downtown, North Franklin, and Tampa Heights. We're looking at a place with the potential for over 200,000 people living and working within a walking distance of this alignment in the next 20 years. The potential for, beyond that, additional commercial square footage, additional office space, and an additional lodging and hotel rooms, significant daily and weekly visitation to the convention center and to venues across downtown. And one of the things we find kind of interesting is the number of students. Now, this 26,000 was a number that we developed before USF Health was built. So this needs to be adjusted now because we have significantly more students heading downtown. And then just within a half mile of the alignment, 5 large-scale projects that represent by themselves a total of $6 billion in private investment downtown. Brian provides the monthly report on ridership. This has been a great story, and we like to tell this story. The gray bars are which is to the far left on this chart, is the ridership that occurred before the DOT grant, the initiation of the free service, the longer hours of service, and the tighter headways. And so we saw a significant response to that change. We saw that response hold for a number of months before the pandemic hit. So our FY 2019 numbers were very strong, from, what's our number, 300,000 in 18 to 850,000 in FY 19. So a huge response. When the COVID hit, those numbers dipped, but those numbers are recovering very quickly. So one of the best parts of this story is that introduction wasn't just a novelty. People have adopted the system, and they're returning quickly as COVID is starting to decline. So you all know the project, it's 2 parts, and I'll buzz through these slides pretty quickly. There's modernization of the existing system to allow for modern streetcar operations. And this is the project that was defined before All for Transportation was invalidated. So this is when we thought we had significant money. But it was modernization of the existing system to support modern streetcar operations, and then the extension to connect in exclusive Guideway service through the core of downtown up to Tampa Heights. Over the last several years, we've gone through the kind of primary steps of project development, including entry of the project into FTA's project development process for potential small starts grant. We've done large-scale public outreach and making decisions about the potential corridor for service and then the specific alignment for the service. We looked at, in that evaluation, the vehicle technologies, the alignment and guideway type, stop locations and concepts for the stops, and the modernization requirements to support the modern vehicles. One of the significant steps we went through early was a lane elimination evaluation with DOT to allow access to a lane in portions of downtown Tampa on Florida. And that was approved early on, and they approved the traffic report as part of the evaluation process. We initiated the NEPA Section 106 process for environmental and cultural impacts. We requested and received the FDOT New Starts funding under the state program, which is up to half of the non-federal share of the project. And that's been committed, and it's been entered in work program, and it's been pushed out, so it's still available to us. And then we submitted one of the big milestones in project development is the FTA ratings request, and we submitted that in August 2020. Now, these are the slides that talk about this system, but what we were looking at was the delivery of a single vehicle technology from end to end of the service. full-day frequent service, high-capacity vehicles, quality stops with level boarding, and the potential for sharing some of the Guideway with BRT if that was a possibility. We looked at the potential to avoid significant impacts on roadway capacity, avoid parking and turning queues, so we were trying to eliminate the potential for the vehicle to get stuck in traffic if it was running in mixed traffic. So that would be coming up to a poorly parked car or delivery vehicle that would stop the train in its tracks. So we've really focused on maximizing exclusive Guideway service. And then we looked at parking, sidewalk, property impacts, very minimal right-of-way required to deliver the extension. So this particular slide, we'll come back to this, is when we went through the vehicle technology assessment, that resulted in a decision to pursue the modern streetcar project. So that was to the modernization of the existing line and to use the modern vehicle on the extension. As you probably know, a modern streetcar vehicle is quite expensive, and some of the improvements that we need to make are also add to project costs. So a significant percentage of the total project cost, as we've currently defined it, is associated with that modernization component. The extension itself, and you all have seen these presentations before, is after looking at multiple alignments through downtown, the process resulted in a decision about using exclusive Guideway along Florida northbound, turning on Palm, and then using exclusive Guideway southbound on Tampa. And Mr. English asked me on the way in, people have asked him about why not Franklin. And there's a number of reasons for that. One of the primary reasons is we wanted to maximize the potential for exclusive Guideway operations. So the streetcar is not sharing that lane with the vehicle. It doesn't have potential to be stuck in traffic or slowed down, especially when we have peak event times and the corridors do get quite congested. Let's see. One of the things that we looked at in the process was the potential for sharing the Guideway with other vehicle technologies. So it could be streetcar, but you could also potentially run a rubber tire vehicle in the same corridor. That would have to be really detailed evaluation of the impacts of shared use, but we designed it so that was a possibility, which means the stops are on the right-hand side of the vehicle rather than left or right because streetcar vehicles are two-sided. And that's partly what this shows. So if you think of the exclusive transit lane on the left-hand side, what we'd be running is running along the left curb line on northbound on Tampa, or northbound on Florida, southbound on Tampa. And then our stops would displace the parking adjacent to that raised barrier. So the stops would always be in the island condition on the right-hand side of the vehicle, and that would allow for mixed use. It would also allow us not to take up limited sidewalk space where we have constrained sidewalk conditions. So we went through a very detailed, what we called the best lane evaluation. In the corridor, when we defined it, along Tampa and Florida, what's the best position in the corridor? How do we avoid impacts? How do we minimize conflicts with garage access points and other uses along the corridor? So that resulted in this set of alignments that we recommended. So we do switch sides a couple times to avoid impacts. For example, northbound on Florida, we start on the left-hand side of the street. When we get to the north, we move to the right-hand side, which puts the stop on the Marion Transit Center side of the corridor and allows us to avoid that heavy left turn at K for people accessing 275. As I mentioned, I forgot I had this one in here. This, like the image I showed before, this shows what a right side stop would look like along northbound Florida, for example. So if you thought about this looking north behind the streetcar, it would queue up to an intersection. There'd be a platform on the right-hand side of the vehicle that would displace parking in the parking lane. People would get off on that stop. They would cross to the sidewalk during the stop signal. And that allows us to avoid the really tight sidewalk space along much of Florida. The modernization improvements when we were looking at modern vehicles included some Guideway reconstruction where we have tight turns. So the modern vehicle requires a 60 to 66-foot turning radius. We have some places where we have 50-foot radius turns now, so we have to smooth them out. We tested that, and that would fit within rights-of-way. The stations would need to be improved, so we'd remove the ramp and high block condition now that provides ADA access to the vehicles. Elevate the ramp level, or elevate the platform level so you could get level boarding on the vehicles. And then the trolley barn, this facility, we would need to do an extension out into the yard to get more internal space for the vehicle maintenance for wash bay and other uses, and then possibly build additional track to provide outdoor storage for vehicles. One of the significant steps is a federal process is we need to go through the NEPA 106 environmental screening process. We have worked with FTA through that process over the last several years. When we submitted the full set of impact reports and documents, we have cases where, because of the history of downtown Tampa, there's a lot of resources underground. So we've identified some locations where we could have impacts on archaeological resources. FTA asked us to do some additional evaluation of those resources. We completed that, and then they followed up and asked us to look at slightly, seeing if we could diverge to minimize impacts completely. So we're in the middle of that process now to look at a potential diversion off the Florida corridor to miss some significant resources.
Where would you have to do that?
The resource is a portion of the Fort Brooks Cemetery that exists under Florida Avenue.
Really?
So the investigation that we did showed that full avoidance may be difficult just because of the depth of the resources underneath the street pavement. So we're looking at options either to minimize that impact or to shift and go possibly east to Morgan, up Morgan, and then back to the Florida corridor and north.
Wow,
So we're testing to see what the impacts of that are.
interesting.
So that's a decision that the city and HART will be working through over the next couple months, and then we'll take that to FTA to see if, initially, it'll be a local decision about a preference about how to proceed, and then FTA will either agree or push back, and we'll continue the discussion. This is where we are now in many ways, is looking at the cost. And what I want to highlight on this slide really quickly is line 70, if you can see that, the vehicle line. The vehicles themselves, not including the other modernization improvements, account for 66 million of the total project cost. And that's based on the cost of vehicles that have been delivered on systems that have been brought into operations over the last couple of years. So their current costs, they're expensive vehicles, and that pushes our number pretty, above the 200 million mark. It also makes that local share a much heavier lift for the community.
Steve, are you still evaluating different manufacturers of vehicles?
There hasn't been a decision about the manufacturer itself, so we identified 3 possibilities that have that meet the FTA requirements for U.S. parts and materials and manufacture. So that's the starting point, and then the vehicle procurement would be in early phases of the design process to go out and actually determine which of those vehicles are appropriate and develop the design specs for stations and other equipment around the selected vehicle.
How many vehicles would we be buying?
That's a great question. I think we included 9 in the estimate. We have to go through some additional operational analysis to test that more carefully. One of the key constraints to with any modernization or the existing heritage vehicles is the passing tracks on the existing line. That really is what caps your headways. And Brian knows, he's tested that probably better than anyone about how much service we can push out at a time. But that's really sort of sets the standard that we can match for the extension. So that, based on some additional modeling to see the performance of the extension, we can test to see the exact number of needs. Usually it's, we're right at the cusp between having 1 car in reserve or 2 cars in reserve based on the number. And that would be one of the factors to evaluate when we look at that. So we look at maximum service level and then possibility for 1 and 2 in reserve.
So $6 or $7 million of a new vehicle. And then go back to the point you made when I interrupted you, which was, how does that affect the local share versus everybody's share?
So the basic, I don't think I had, no, I didn't have the original funding table in here. What we presented, and we took this this was approved by the city and HARP board in July of 2020 before we submitted the rating requests. We submitted a financial plan. And that financial plan, we looked at maxing out at the time what the cap was for the federal small starts program was $100 million. So we had a $234 million project. You take $100 million off the top, and then the remainder of that gets split between the state New Starts program and local funding. So 67 million, 67.5 million from the state, 67.5 million from locals, and then figuring out the share between HART and the city and other sources would be the next point of discussion.
Can I get you to repeat that real quick? I'm sorry, I heard the 100 million part, and I just want to make sure I understood what you said.
Sure. So in the FTA program, there's 2 tiers to the program. There's New Starts, which are larger projects, and Small Starts. So we were looking at submitting in the Small Starts program, and they have a maximum federal share amount of $100 million. And typically, their maximum percent is 50%, but our project was 234, so we couldn't get 50 because we wanted to max out at the 100. So I think our federal share was, someone can do math real fast, 46% federal share. But we looked at the maximum amount for federal under Small
So
Starts.
you started off,
Please.
so you started off thinking that it was going to be $100 million, and it ended up being 230?
No, not at all, not at all. The federal program has a maximum federal share of $100 million.
Okay, so we just had a estimate, and we thought we were going to be able to get into the small portion, and then it ended up.
No, I'm sorry, I'm not describing it properly. The New Starts and Small Starts, generally, New Starts is larger than $250, $300 million projects fall into the larger scale. And then you compete in that program with New York City, Chicago, the major transit programs in the country. The Small Starts.
Anybody who has a new start would go into this particular program.
Well, they would choose between that's the key question. They would choose between New Starts and Small Starts. The smaller scale projects, generally under $300 million, would fall into the Small Starts program bucket, and there's a maximum of $100 million available in that program,
As opposed to the New Starts,
as opposed to New Starts.
which is more.
Yeah.
So you originally were hoping you could do this for $200 million.
It's not even that we had a target dollar amount at that point. It was that the New Starts, Small Starts was the appropriate program to seek funding from, and $100 million is our maximum amount.
See, I was under the impression that the local match would be a maximum of 25%. I mean, you're talking about a pretty big local requirement, right?
67
It's about, it goes to something like 28.
Oh, all right, so it's close to 25%.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a big number.
It's a big
and
number.
I haven't heard that number in a while.
Yeah.
What is that number?
67.
The
67 million?
67.5 million for local
Is
match.
the local match.
Yeah.
And how would that be broken down in between the different entities? You know?
With the plan that was submitted had about 70% of that from HART AFT funds and about 30% from city AFT funds. And I can give you that table. That's,
So
what was submitted in 2020 before.
So 70, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That was what was submitted with HART board's concurrence at the time for the ratings request.
Mr. Johnson, that was from All for Transportation?
Yeah. So it would have been 70% HART and all 30% city? You said that was the breakdown?
Approximately, and I don't want you to quote me on the specific number, but it was proportionally roughly that share, and I'll get you the table.
So go on, thank you.
Sure. Is there any, is that, I mean, I apologize for the lack of clarity
Well-
about the programs.
There are probably lots of questions, but I have one, and that is that the referendum was tossed by the state Supreme Court. I assume we're going to try it again next year, November. If it passes, then theoretically, it is validated. It would generate enough revenue for Hart and the city to meet those financial requirements as they would have previously if that fund had,
There's enough
Enough.
money in the bank to do it now, it's just not available to spend.
Yeah,
There was,
right.
you
Mr.
know,
Johnson?
approximately 500 million collected, so if that's available, that could potentially support this project and other projects, but we don't know how it's going to play out until next year.
So while I think it is a good assumption to make that there will be some type of a new referendum that'll be put on at some point, that, again, you know, my math is not very good, so I don't have an actual number to be able to put as far as what a Hart share would look at this, but, you know, these are big numbers, and I may have to ask Ms. LeGrand at another point as far as what the priorities are for Hart, but yeah, I know this is important to a lot of people, and we think that it's got a lot of potential, but, you know, I'm not sure. You know, I'm here because I'm a Hart appointee. My job is to be able to make sure that Hart's viewpoint is looked at here.
sure.
And I'm not 100%, and again, I'll have to go back and review this, but I'm not sure as far as the way the priorities for Hart and this particular board, if they're necessarily matching up, and this is a big dollar amount when I think right now, probably Hart's biggest priority is probably having a new heavy maintenance facility. And if Ms. LeGrand, feel free to be able to slap me upside the head and tell me I'm wrong here, but when we start talking numbers this big, it starts giving me a little bit of heartburn, you know, when we're talking one thing, you know, as far as this, and again, I'm not trying to be able to say that this isn't a good project, but, you know, I know, you know, that, you know, I've been harping about, you know, this new heavy maintenance facility, and, you know, that's $100 million right there, and we're talking about all this money that, you know, we may get, you know, based off of the referendum, and it's, you know, I'm just a little bit concerned right now.
Sure.
There's some efforts to reconsider elements of the project. I could talk about that real quick.
Yes, please.
If that'd be helpful.
Sorry, if I'm getting out
That's
of order
okay.
here, I apologize.
No, you're not. No, those are all
that's
good
excellent.
questions, Eric. It was a lot of money. These numbers haven't changed in 3 years. I mean, that's what we were talking about before the referendum. Hart is going to get, would have received a huge percentage of that revenue. And so the number that was going to be devoted to the streetcar system did not appear to be out of context at that time. However, the referendum got thrown out. So we have another one coming up. There's also, and I'm not sure if any of the city representatives here can speak to this, but I know there's been a lot of discussion about federal stimulus money, and I know that Hart is, I have no doubt, talking to people about that. I think the city's been trying to figure out what to do and whether there's money available and where that money could be spent. And one of the places I assume it could be spent is on the new streetcar system. Because the bigger picture for the streetcar extension isn't just the extension, which will in itself be a dramatic change for the community, but it is really always been anticipated to be the jumping off point to go north and west with rail transit. That's been the discussion for, I don't know, 20 years or more. So just for context, none of this is really new, but we don't have the money. I
I'm
mean,
aware of that.
so that's the point. Yeah, I mean, your point's well taken.
And if I could from there, there's a couple things that have changed in the federal program. The potential dollar amounts have gone up. And we understand there may be a possibility to get a greater % of federal share in the future program. So we're looking at that possibility. of additional federal money for the project. We've already got a hard commitment from DOT, and it's in work program to support their portion of the project, which is 50% of the non-federal share is what their legislated limit is on the money. And then we're looking now at potentially redefining the project to do it in phases. So to do an initial phase, which would use the heritage vehicles on the extension, which takes the modernization costs off the table and takes about $100 million off the top of the project. So we could be talking about a very different scale of a project. It would be a less capacity. However, we're not maxing out the capacity of the system now. So that could be perfectly fine for a 10-year investment, and then modernization if that extension proves itself and we need more capacity. So we are looking at a redefinition, and that's something that the city and HART are in the process of evaluating.
Who is?
The city and HART.
So who's actually doing the study? The city or Hart? Is it the city and Hart doing this, or is it, 'cause if I remember in the first slide,
So far, it's been the city.
the city's been leading the study,
The city has been leading and paying for it to date.
okay?
HART has been a partner and a technical support for that process throughout
But
that
the-
effort.
But the transit agency or the county isn't doing the lead part of it. We're just doing technical support?
As a partner, so we've always described it as a partner. So when every decision that's made on the project is made with city and HART's concurrence since we've started.
So, Ms. LeGrand, so we've been able to, I just want to be able to make sure that HART is actually, I know it's a partnership. We use the word partnership a lot, and I want to make sure that HART is actually being utilized in the way that I believe that it should be utilized, where we're the transit experts
Sure.
here in the county, and this certainly isn't to be able to diminish anything that the city is doing. We've got great partnership with the city. I just want to be able to make sure that HART is being utilized in the way that it should be. Ms. LeGrand and her team has an excellent team, a very smart team, and that there's a reason why the transit agency is being run by them, because they're the experts in this. I just want to make sure that we're not getting backwards on the way this is being worked, as far as who's leading what and who's telling who what to do.
Yeah, I mean, the approach to this project in terms of the lead from a planning standpoint is similar to what's happened with the initial project and the initial extension from Dick Greco Plaza up to Fort Brooke Garage. So it's been a very similar kind of relationship in the history. And then under the tri-party agreement, that relationship between who does what and who advances the project into operations is all defined in the agreements.
Okay, when were those agreements?
They were started with the initial system, and then they've evolved since then. So there's a package, I don't know the total number of documents, there's probably 15 files that represent the total package of the tri-party agreement between Tampa Streetcar Inc., the city of Tampa, and HART.
Okay.
Adley, you want to say anything?
Sure. So thank you, Steve, for the presentation, and Director Johnson, thanks for putting a lot of questions out there that I've had to jot down. So hopefully I did a great job of gathering your questions, and I can respond to them all. If I missed something, please jump in. So first I would say is that, since I have arrived, I will say that, we have had a couple of meetings with the Streetcar team, myself, Brian Allen, and Ms. Wright. And really our intention in those conversations was really for me specifically to understand how we got to where we are now. And to be completely transparent, I did have some concerns on the cost. I thought it was pretty high, didn't understand how we got there. And I will say that we had some colorful discussions. Would you agree with me, Mr. Shoecraft?
I'm smiling under that.
Okay. To get to a point where I could understand how we had, a $230 million project for, less than a 2-mile extension. It just seemed pretty high for me. So we started having the conversation, and as what you heard today is because of our partnership sitting around the table and talking about the fact that the existing system is not all the way optimized. We're not at capacity. We do have the ability to run frequency up to 7.5 minute headways, which we're not doing that now. So based on the proposed project at the 230 clip, we were looking at frequencies of 10-minute headways. We could do that with our existing system. So because of the input of Brian Allen and us sitting around the table, we were able to start having this conversation about going down a different path of looking at just extending the system with our current vehicles. I will also say is that we are in the process of developing an MOU so we can clearly define and articulate our roles. That slide that you did see, it's clear. It says that the city is leading the study. There's also support from FDOT, and HART, as it's listed on the slide, is the FTA grant recipient, right? So that doesn't really articulate, and I can understand your concern, that we are leading any effort. We're here to be the ones that do the paperwork to get the funding. So we just need to work as we develop this MOU to have it extremely clear, explicitly clear what HART's role is, so that you as a board member for HART is comfortable that it's not just us playing nice, but it is codified that we are working as leaders in this effort alongside our other partners. So I understand that, and the point is well taken.
And just real quick, when you said, so we'll be doing the technical parts of this. That's the way I heard you say that, as far as the way we're looking at the MOUs?
So we haven't developed the MOU as yet, but that's the next item on our agenda, that the city, HDR, and HART are working with, going through that process. So we haven't started it, but this next item on our agenda. Based on the slide that you referenced, though, our role right now is not a technical lead. So HDR is the technical consultant for this effort, and they are a contractor to the city of Tampa.
Okay. I just want to make sure that, because when I see, we're the grant recipient, I don't want to be just a pass-through to where, all the money's coming to us, and then we're going to be doing all the work, and all the money's going to be going out somewhere else. I'm sure we'll end up finding ways to be able to, pay for certain things, but, this is going to be a very, very large chunk of money. I don't think no matter how we cut it, 100 million, 200 million, that's a lot of money. I just want to make sure that we're going to be given from a HART perspective, we're going to be given the kind of latitude that we, I think, deserve on something that is going to be such a large portion of, from a budgetary standpoint for us, from a HART standpoint.
Understood. And there will be an opportunity for you, as well as the other board members of the HART board, to review the MOU before we execute it.
Perfect. We can keep going until I have my next question again. Thank you again for all this.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
I have one closure slide that's next
Sure.
up. So, as I mentioned, many of these I've already sort of talked about a bit about where things stand in the process. A lot of this is how we're interacting with FTA and working through those requirements and coordination activities. We're still looking at that avoidance and minimization analysis to avoid impacts on cultural resources. We need to look at this potential redefinition of the project, test to see how that would score in the FTA process to see if it's competitive for the federal money, and understand what that financial scenarios would be depending on how much we sought, what share of fundings we get from Fed, from state, and from local sources. If we redefine the project, we need to do a round of stakeholder and public engagement so people understand that there's been a shift in direction, and make sure people understand that it's still a valuable investment for the public to make. We would have to resubmit a revised rating package to FTA and get rescored. So right now, because of the lack of all for transportation funding, we're in an under review status at FTA. They didn't score us low, they didn't score us high. They just said, under review, get your financial house in order and tell us how you're going to pay for it. So we're in a bit of a limbo phase, not unusual in cases where a local source shifted.
Is that
But
until
we're still in the process.
So, but as far as this being in progress or whatever, we can kind of stay in that status.
We can stay in under review. There's not a time clock on the small starts program. New starts, there's a time clock. We have to advance the project at a certain pace. Under small starts, we can remain in a somewhat of a limbo state while we work out some local details. So we have time to do that. We would submit that revised ratings request to FTA, see how we scored, and that would tell us if that federal money was available and how we could proceed into design, into construction, and work through the small starts grant agreement process. The next bullet is the important bullet, which you have talked about, is restructuring the existing governance agreements. So as I mentioned, they've been patched together over time. There's some sort of missing pieces about who's responsible for what, who's liable for what sort of damage or issues along the system. They need to be drafted and approved, and that process has been underway, at least from an attempt to get it scheduled and get it rolling. And then after those processes are complete, then it would move into final design and engineering. That concludes the presentation.
President English, may I?
Is that process underway?
What's that?
The governance agreement?
There have been reviews on, I believe there was a period where HART had done some review and markup of documents. The city had done it on their side, but they haven't fully gotten together to start to hash through that.
Yeah, I would expect that THS needs to be a part of that and understand what's going on too,
Yeah.
please. Great. Any other questions of Mr. Shoecraft?
I've got one, and I really appreciate you doing this. I think I was the last one appointed to the board, so y'all have a little bit more historical knowledge, so I apologize if I'm having to go over stuff that's already been, talked about before. But can you give me a reason as to why we didn't, or why it was not looked at for, and I'm gonna have to point to this because I don't have any real way to be able to do it, why we didn't go west, or why it wasn't studied to be able to go west and essentially create the whole circle?
It's part of, so we did look at, there's kind of a, I don't know what to call it exactly, some sort of a spaghetti map where we looked at all these different options, crossing the river, going to west, into West Tampa, going further north, looping it back to Ybor, cutting through the middle of downtown. We scored all those alternatives based on population, employment, potential ridership, impact, and cost. And when we looked at the loop potential, we weren't picking up significantly more ridership on that loop, but we had to build about 1.5 miles of track to make it happen. So our costs went up, but we didn't get a proportional bump in ridership when we did that. So it's a potential future improvement, and I think if Brightline lands where we think it might, that could be a really important connection. So I think it's a potential future phase.
Well, and that's where, and I don't know exactly, this will just be more editorial comment, I guess, for me.
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. As far as, potential projects that are gonna possibly be happening around the Ybor area that I won't speak.
Yeah. Understood.
About. It just seemed like, at some point that I don't want to say that, we, start on that like right now, the first part, but it just seemed like it would be, I understand your point, and I get it as far as, the cost per rider, I guess, is the best way to be able to kind of say that.
Yep.
That's got to be something that's, looked at. But it just seems like there's as far as in some of these areas here, it really seems like there's a real potential to be able to, and I don't know, again, not knowing the study part of it as well, how the study was conducted, it just seems like there's a lot of opportunity here from a workforce standpoint, being able to get folks in and out of very, very, there's some potential areas that, I think and I think everybody here will agree that are going to possibly blow up. And I would much rather be on the forefront of that and putting infrastructure in ahead of time as opposed to, having to go and try and figure out a way to be able to, kind of do that later on down the road when we might not be prepared for it. So
Understood.
And I can talk to you and, Ms. LeGrand about that at some point as well. But I just think that there's a lot of potential in that particular area from a economic development standpoint that we could really be a part of there. So I think that's all my questions for right now.
Anyone else have any further questions?
President English, I have a comment.
Yeah, sure.
So, Director Johnson, one of the questions you asked, and I did not respond to it. I was waiting on staff to provide me with some information. So you asked about HART's prioritizing or being a part of the prioritization process for the streetcar extension. So we did look to the board meeting in July that Mr. Shoecraft mentioned. We did not see the streetcar listed on the list of priorities. So what we will do is have in this next calendar year a meeting where we can add our projects of priorities before the HART board, so that at least we'll have something that documents the HART board's, priorities moving forward. So I did write that down.
And thank you. I just think it's critical for us, especially if we're doing this from a federal standpoint. I know I do this, having to go and talk to DC folks all the time, is that, if you have your priorities, if one group is saying something is a priority, another group is saying something, a different priority, then, everybody looks at, DC comes down and looks at us like, what in the world are you guys talking about? Because you can't even decide on what your individual priorities are. So if there is going to be, I think this is an excellent chance for us to be able to create some type of synergy from a priority standpoint, because otherwise I think it's going to affect us negatively down the road as we're going to be able to try and do other things later on. I want to make sure we're all saying the same thing, because right now it doesn't seem like that we're all saying the same thing when it comes to going to the feds and saying this is what FTA, I guess, to be specific. Am I wrong there?
But when we submitted the ratings request, so the ratings request has a preliminary financial plan. When we submitted that was presented and approved by the HART board before we submitted.
And that was July 2020?
I believe it was, the submittal was in August, it was late August, so I'm not sure what the meeting date was, but I can find
Okay,
it.
that was right before I came on then, so, okay. That makes
Okay.
a little more sense there. Okay.
So we'll just make sure staff finds that, and then if it's not documented, what we'll do is just, bring it back to the HART board so that we can prioritize our projects and everything will be documented.
Perfect.
Yes, Mr. Shoecraft, thank you so much. I had a feeling this would be a useful presentation for us all. Mr. Johnson, just so you know, we have been on the same page for years, and so it isn't that we're talking about changing or not changing. We're talking about continuing to refine the process that we've been embarked on for quite some time.
Well, okay, thanks.
Sure.
Thanks we're happy to come back at your pleasure for updates.
Thank you so much.
Let the city know. Thank
Yes,
you.
well, you'll probably be back, and, we're going to want to hear more from the city as well on kind of how things are unfolding. I get the impression that there's a lot of dynamism going on, not just with the redevelopment plans in Ybor City, but thoughts about different alignments for the streetcar, and that's all fine. We're just interested in being kept abreast as well of exactly what people are thinking about. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, that was fun. The next item on our agenda is legal and legislative report. Mr. Smoker?
Chairman, I have nothing to report.
I asked, yes,
I was just kind of curious, y'all, you don't have anything to report as far as from legislatively when we're about ready to go into session? Is there anything that?
Not that I'm aware of, but I'm happy to look into it.
I was just curious. I just figured that something would have popped up, but okay.
the next item is the chair's report, and we are moving up on the need to revisit our CSX insurance policies, and we will really be taking that up in detail in January. So I've asked Mr. Grant Melnick, who is the insurance agent who has been charged with negotiating with CSX, to come forward, Grant, and give us an update this month so there are no surprises for next month, because next month we will need to act upon that so that we can enable that policy to begin in February. Mr. Melnick?
How's everybody doing?
Very good.
My executive assistant had LASIK
Some
recently.
light reading, yes.
I was like, oh my God, it's so small.
It's
So as
really
your
unreal.
insurance
It is
broker,
light.
I just want to tell you that LASIK really does work, apparently. But anyways, yes, Michael did ask me to come up. And also, he was, adamant that, last year we did have a little fire drill. It worked out obviously in our favor, but, to basically make sure that by next meeting, we'll be able to go. And I told Michael that, the issues with that is, even though we are a quasi-governmental entity, the insurance is, you never want to tip your hand. And so that's why I've always been somewhat reluctant to say, okay, we'll go ahead and bind it, this coverage or this order, rather than pushing the envelope with the carriers and pushing them off each other to see if we can go ahead and extract the best deal possible. That doesn't relate to what happened last year. Last year was obviously our negotiations with CSX, which were incredibly fruitful. I have maintained a relationship with them, and I believe that we are going to have another positive result with them. But essentially where we are and what you see today is this is the marketing log from last year. And the reason why I put the marketing log first is the marketing log kind of dictates what our premium tower was. And so that's what I want to show you what the kind of the correlation is. The other reason why I did this to show you the marketing log is last year and the year before, I told you that the pie is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Well, if you look at the amount of carriers that we had willing to insure us just from last year, and now compare it to what we have now, the rail line markets are getting incredibly, it's getting very tight. As we all know, insurance right now, especially in Florida, on all lines of coverage are pretty much in disarray. The rail markets are going to be a longer term problem. I'm hoping that a solution will provide itself via the state, but I'm not too sure essentially about that. Regarding this year's renewal, we're not going to have any crazy changes. The only positive, or what would be a positive option is if we were able to convince our partner to drop the limits of liability to 50 million. And that would really put us in a great position.
And what do you expect to happen?
I think we're going to be okay.
In what respect?
I think that they're going to drop the limits liability.
Do you?
Yes,
From 75 million to 50 million?
I think so.
Well, that would certainly be a positive development.
I mean, it really was. Last year was an incredible breakthrough. I think you remember from the first meetings we had with all the partners, that was kind of a disaster, but I think after 20 years, everyone's cooled down, maybe, kind of, hopefully. And now a relationship has been formed and built. We've looked at this every single way possible, and I'm pretty positive that we're going to go ahead and get that request filled.
Okay, great. Excellent. Any other questions? We will look forward to seeing you at our board meeting next month. Please keep Mr. Smoker and I notified of how things are going, and be sure that this package is reprinted to be readable.
Yes, sir.
And is made available to all of our board members reasonably prior to our board meeting.
Would you like me to email, or go ahead and email a bigger copy?
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks.
Because there is some funny commentation in
Yeah,
this.
I'm sure. I
You just
can't read
Lazy.
font that small anymore,
Trust me, when I came in, I said something.
I'm sure. But thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it, and we will look forward to seeing you next month.
Likewise, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next item on our agenda is the HART CEO report. Ms. LeGrand?
Yes, just a really quick report. I can't believe it's December already, so I guess this is the last meeting of the year. Wanted to share with you that we are, as a team, a HART team, looking at the contract. So you may be aware that we are on the 5th year of our extension of our contract to operate the streetcar system. So we have been working with our internal council team as well as Mr. Allen's team to really take a look at the contract so we can be prepared at the top of the year to start moving forward and initiate conversations on how we'd like to move forward. So I did want to bring that to your attention. I think we mentioned it at one of our meetings a couple of months back, and you had asked for a status update. So
You did. You
that's where we are with that. We are also going to, for the next year, continue with the conversation of identifying speakers to come to this meeting, for presentations. And we also were able, in working with the Community Streetcar Coalition, to add Tampa as one of their peer review cities. So that's something else that will be coming before all of you for our, for the next year. So
Excellent.
did want to share that with you guys and look forward to continuing to, move the ball down the court.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to thank you and Hart,
Sorry,
Yeah, go
I had
ahead.
one other thing, but I'll follow after you. You can continue your thought.
I was
Sorry.
just going to thank you for, you and your staff, for doing a great job operating the streetcar under very difficult circumstances this year. We really all appreciate it and have been very impressed with everything that you've accomplished.
Well, thank you. And most of that credit goes to Mr. Brian Allen there and his team. And they, as you stated, they do an excellent job and they are very accommodating, and we're happy to have them. In addition, I wanted to mention, because I know the next item on the agenda is the Vector Media sales update. We are fortunate that we hired a new Director of Marketing and Communication, Ms. Nikki Frenny. She's actually here with us today, so thought it would be great to introduce her. And she is leading the team that does the updates on our media and sales, and she has some great ideas on how we can do more with what we currently have and how we can grow our dollars as it relates to media and advertising and the such. So wanted to take an opportunity to recognize Ms. Freeney.
Nice to have you.
Mr. English?
You done? Oh, good, okay.
Mr. English, I just want to say I had the pleasure of meeting Miss Nikki last week at the Tampa Downtown Partnership Holiday Party. And
That's great.
very dynamic woman. We're very lucky to have her, so thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. The next item is a Vector Media sales activity update. Mr. Rowland?
Good afternoon, President English, Board, Ms. LeGrand. Pretty quick update today. So as of October 21st, new business, we do have a new advertiser in the Greco Plaza. Tito's Vodka has occupied that space for the month. So they'll be doing the pillars around the Greco streetcar station. Year to date, January through December of '21, as part of THS guarantee, we are $115,000 in revenue. Current advertisers, wraps, interior cards, step advertisements are as follows: Miller Lite, the Tampa Bay Lightning, and the Winter Village Express, Coors, Cigar City, Tampa General Hospital. And just a little side note, I don't know if everybody's aware of what we had a little bit of a challenge getting the Winter Village Express wrapped on the exterior due to one of the cars that was still in
Yeah, we heard.
in refurbishment. So we were able to partner with the Lightning. They did give up their end caps to put the Winter Village Express
very nice
advertisement
of
on
them.
there. We did interior cards and steps, so we were able to still accommodate that.
Thank you.
So that was a little challenge, but we got through that piece. And that concludes my report. If there's any questions, be happy to answer.
Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
There are no City of Tampa financial statements for this month. They will be conducting an audit, and we will see all of that in several months. So moving to old business, is there any old business to take up? Is there any new business? This concludes the regular business for today. Are there any additional comments by board members?
That's it, thank you.
Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.